My rude daughter called me a lazy mom and looked down on me, but at one family dinner, I revealed who I truly was and shattered her perfect illusion. I never thought the day would come when I'd become invisible in the very home I carefully maintained, corner by corner. Yet, it happened slowly, quietly, like a photograph fading under the sun. No one in the family noticed, but every glance, every offhand comment slowly pushed me to the margins of my own life. My name is Linda. This morning, when I placed a plate of freshly baked cookies on the kitchen counter, my daughter, Amber, who just turned 16, barely raised an eyebrow toward her best friend and casually said, "Mom, can you please stop hovering? We're trying to study." The words hit like a rock. I still smiled, pushing the plate toward them. "I just thought you girls might want a snack." Amber shook her head, not even looking up from her book. "Mom, seriously, who even moms like this anymore? You're always baking like it's some 1950s movie or something." I caught the uncomfortable glance from Chloe, her best friend, as she reached for a cookie. At least someone still knew how to be polite. "Your mom's cookies are actually really good," Chloe said softly. "Yeah, well, that's all she really does," Amber replied in a flat tone, as if I wasn't standing right there. "Dad says she's lucky he makes enough so she can just hang out in the kitchen all day." That comment sliced through me like a cold, thin blade. But I didn't show it. I wiped the counter and nodded like everything was just fine. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably Daniel, my assistant, updating me on the progress of a company acquisition. I quickly slipped it back into my jacket. "I'm heading out for a bit. Got some errands. You girls be careful." Amber didn't even look up, just waved a hand dismissively. Yeah, sure. I'm sure you're super busy with stuff." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, exhaling deeply, like I was releasing 100 pounds off my chest. If Amber only knew I wasn't heading to the grocery store like she assumed, but to my private office downtown where I was running a tech empire and preparing to acquire one of the industry's top companies. Who knows what she'd say? They know nothing. All they see is a woman who cooks, does laundry, makes dinner, and keeps everything at home running. To them, that's all I am. Amber once told her friend, "I spend all day watching cooking shows and trying to copy recipes." Well, that's not entirely wrong. I did learn to make mousse from one of those episodes, but I was also closing an investor deal in Silicon Valley at the same time, and Brian, my husband, he proudly calls himself the provider, the breadwinner, the one steering the ship. He's never asked how the bills are always paid on time, or who bought Amber that new laptop when his credit card was maxed out. I've played the role of the perfect wife for so long, even I started to forget who I really am. But not anymore, because when a $32 million contract is waiting for my signature, one that will send waves through the industry, Amber's snide remarks and Brian's dismissive glances no longer carry weight. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as I pulled into the private parking garage. The office nameplate, LM Holdings, glinted under the sunlight. Its glass walls reflected a woman who no longer wore a flour-stained apron, but one silently commanding an empire. And I'm ready for the day they find out the truth. But before that happens, I still have a few more batches of cookies to bake. The lazy housewife is about to show them who's really holding this family together. My office sits on the 29th floor of a glass high-rise in downtown Austin, Texas. From up here, the cars below look like ants, people like dots on a board. Up here, I'm not the overlooked mother, not the wife tagged with the word lucky. Up here, I'm Linda Morgan, CEO and founder of Orion Ventures, one of the fastest-growing private tech firms in the country and the secret force preparing to acquire Cybernova Inc., the leading name in artificial intelligence. They still haven't figured out who's behind the acquisition, right? I asked as I walked in, removing my sunglasses and coat. Ethan, our chief strategist and my longtime business partner, sat waiting with 2 coffees. He raised an eyebrow and grinned. No suspicion at all. Cybernova's exec still thinks it's some anonymous New York investment group. Pretty sure he never imagined the person behind it all was a mom who bakes. I gave a small smile, settled into my chair, and glanced over the screen. The latest email read, "Final negotiation round approved. 68% equity acquisition of Cybernova. One more step, and everything I've built in silence over the past 7 years will reach its peak." "And you're sure there's no trace back to Orion as the parent company?" I asked without taking my eyes off the data. "Positive. Shell companies, bridge funds, everything is clean. We're still a ghost, Ethan replied, placing a folder on my desk. But there's something else. It seems Cybernova's chairman, Derek Vaughn, is getting suspicious. He started probing through our intermediary bank. The name Derek Vaughn sent a chill down my spine, but I quickly regained composure. He was the type of man who believed women shouldn't be at major deal tables. I still remember the first time I met him at a tech summit in San Diego. I posed as a small-time investor pitching a new algorithm idea. Derek laughed in front of the entire room and said, "You should stick to taking care of your family. This stuff isn't for cookie-baking moms." I smiled and remembered every word. If he digs too deep, we could be at risk. Ethan nodded. Should we go public? Hit them with a direct strike. I paused, then shook my head. Not yet. I'm not ready for my family to know. Amber and Brian still think I just schedule dental appointments and change paper towels. I let out a dry chuckle, but my eyes stayed sharp. When the truth comes out, I don't want them just shocked. I want them to reflect. Ethan stood. Understood. I'll make sure everything stays on course. But one more thing. Derek's planning a closed-door shareholders meeting this Friday. Sounds like he's getting ready to make a move first. I leaned on the desk, my gaze cutting through the glass. Friday? Good. Schedule Orion's board meeting that morning. And Ethan, invite Derek Vaughn. He likes surprises, doesn't he? Ethan chuckled and nodded, then exited the room. I leaned back in my chair, watching the project maps glowing on the big screen. Each dot was a deal I closed, each line a strategy executed in the shadows. For 7 years, I'd been both the mother who never missed dinner and the woman signing $1 million contracts during lunch breaks. No one asked, no one suspected, and that's been my greatest advantage. The phone rang. Julie, my assistant, calling from downstairs. Ma'am, Brian just called. He said he'll be home late tonight. Big meeting. Oh, and he asked if you could iron a few new shirts for him. I checked the time, 3:47 p.m. Thank you, Julie. Tell him I'll take care of, as always. I hung up, picked up a pen, and wrote a single line in my notebook. Prepare for the reveal. Friday, family must be present. They've lived in the dark long enough. I smiled, regaining my composure, and began planning the most memorable family lunch they would ever experience. None of them, not Brian, not Amber, and certainly not Derek Vaughn, could imagine that the woman they thought only knew how to bake was actually holding the future of the entire tech industry in her hands. That evening, as I laid dinner on the table, like always, Amber was buried in her phone, and Brian was absorbed in a printed financial report from work, not even glancing at the roast I had spent the entire afternoon preparing. Can we all pause for a moment and listen to Mom? I said gently, pouring lemonade into Amber's glass. Brian sighed but folded his paper. Amber didn't even look up. Is this about me using my phone at the table again? No, I just want us to do something special together this week, I said, keeping my voice steady. What exactly? Brian asked, already looking at his phone. This Friday, I made lunch reservations downtown. It's a very special place. I want the whole family to come. Amber frowned. Mom, I have dance rehearsal that afternoon, probably can't make it. You can skip just one. I already spoke with your coach, and she agreed. I smiled, hiding my nerves. Amber's head snapped up. You did what? You talked to her without asking me first? Brian chimed in. And I have a board meeting at lunch. I gently placed my fork down. You don't. Your schedule is open. I called your assistant before making the reservation. Brian looked up, visibly thrown off. You called my assistant? I wanted to make sure we could all be there, I replied calmly. Amber narrowed her eyes at me. So, you've planned everything already and we're just supposed to go along with it like it's the 1950s? I looked at her. Behind the protest, I could already see it, the curiosity blooming. Trust me, this lunch will be unforgettable. Wednesday morning, I received an email from Ethan. Derek Vaughn is holding an emergency press conference this afternoon. Looks like he's about to make his first move. I called Ethan immediately, my voice calm even though my heart was beating faster. Does he know anything? Not sure, but I think he's trying to control the narrative before Orion announces the acquisition. I stood up and walked toward the large window, watching the traffic swirl below like a mess of tangled thoughts. Let him talk. And Ethan, prepare a press release, but don't publish it until I say. I want to play this big. Ethan hesitated. Linda, are you sure? If he gets ahead in the media, it might impact the deal's value. Then we won't wait until after his press conference. We'll interrupt it. I'll be there in the room. Linda, I won't say a word. Just show up right as he's loudly criticizing the anonymous buyer. Let him see my face. Let him realize he's just been outmaneuvered by the woman he once called a housewife with a hobby for junk stocks. Ethan let out a soft laugh. You really know how to create a moment. I smiled. I spent 7 years building everything in silence. Now it's time to let the echo speak. That Wednesday afternoon, I walked into the auditorium where the press conference was about to begin, just minutes before Derek took the stage. I sat in the third row, surrounded by reporters and investors. No one recognized me. Just a woman in a simple blazer, hair neatly tied, holding a notepad. Derek appeared, launching into his speech with full confidence, hands gesturing emphatically with each point. And I want to make it clear that we are not easily deceived by anonymous entities, especially inexperienced players trying to elbow their way into major league deals. I crossed my legs, leaned back in my seat, and didn't take my eyes off him. As the speech transitioned into blame, criticism, and doubts about the legitimacy of the deal, I stood up. Calmly, I stepped out of the row and walked straight down the center aisle, each click of my heels against the floor sharp as a ticking clock. Derek saw me. He froze mid-sentence, eyes widening with a flicker of unmistakable panic. I offered only a small smile and a slight nod. No words were necessary. I walked out of the room under his stunned gaze and the murmurs trailing behind me. That evening, I sent a message to Ethan. Media update. Release the official statement confirming Orion Ventures' acquisition of 68% of Cybernova. Include the CEO's name and Ethan attach a photo from today's press conference. The game had begun. And I, the woman everyone thought was only good at baking cookies, had just made a move no one saw coming. Friday, 11:45 a.m. The black SUV rolled slowly into the Orion Tower parking garage, the private entrance reserved for the highest-level executives. Brian sat in the passenger seat, frowning at his surroundings. This doesn't look much like a restaurant, he remarked, glancing at his watch. Are you sure you didn't get the address wrong? I just smiled and opened the door. Let's go. Today's lunch is a little different. Amber stepped out, rolling her eyes. Please don't tell me you brought us to a bake sale. I'd rather go home. I said nothing, only led them toward the private elevator, swiped my access card, and pressed the button for the 34th floor, the very top. When the elevator doors opened, they were met with a sleek marble hallway leading to a set of large glass doors etched with Orion Ventures boardroom. Executive Council. Brian stopped short. Linda, what is going on here? You'll find out soon, I replied, pushing the doors open. Inside, time seemed to stand still. All the board members were present. The large display screens were already lit up, showing a slide that read, Orion Cybernova Merger. Official announcement. At the head of the table sat one empty chair, the CEO's seat. Derek Vaughn stood near a legal aide, his face flushing bright red as soon as he saw me. Brian and Amber were stunned, speechless. I walked straight to the head of the table, paused, and turned to face my family. Everyone, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Linda Morgan, CEO and founder of Orion Ventures, and the person who's been overseeing the acquisition of Cybernova for the past year. Amber dropped her phone. The clatter echoed through the room. She stared at me wide-eyed, like she was seeing a total stranger. Brian's jaw dropped. You're the CEO? Not starting today, since 7 years ago. The air in the room tightened like a drawn bowstring. Derek stepped forward, his voice trying to stay composed. There must be some mistake, she's just a homemaker. I met her at a charity event a few years back. I nodded. Yes, you were the one who laughed when I proposed a capital restructuring idea for your company, told me I should focus on baking. I turned to Ethan, standing in the corner with his laptop ready. Display the legal documents. Ethan pressed a key, the screens shifted to show a series of digital documents, merger papers, financial statements, recorded negotiation transcripts, and an analysis of suspicious fund transfers from Cybernova's reserve account. Derek Vaughn, I said clearly, we have all the evidence showing you used company assets for personal investments while reporting losses to shareholders. Derek snapped. You're fabricating this. I pulled a document from the file and slid it across the table to him. Payment bank statement with your signature. Derek turned to his aide, now pale. The aide gave a reluctant nod, confirming it was real. You have two choices, Derek. I said, my voice calm but sharp. Sign the transfer agreement and step down quietly, or let the press, the SEC, and your shareholders find out what you did with their pension fund. The room fell silent. You have 30 seconds. Derek looked around, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked at me, then at Amber and Brian, still stunned. Fine, he growled. You win. He grabbed a pen and signed the document with force. Ethan swiftly collected and sealed the papers. I turned to the board. The deal is complete. Orion now officially owns 68% of Cybernova. We're entering a new era. The room erupted in applause, but I didn't look at them. I turned to Brian, the man who thought he was the backbone of the family, and Amber, the daughter who once said all I did was bake cookies. Brian exhaled, voice full of disbelief. How long have you kept this from us? I looked at him. 7 years. 7 years of running a corporation, cooking dinner, attending parent-teacher meetings, and helping with science projects. Amber whispered, Mom, you're a millionaire CEO. I smiled. No, sweetheart, I'm a billionaire. They stared at me in stunned silence, and I stood tall, more confident and steady than ever before. Now they knew. But the real question was, were they ever truly ready to find out who their mother really was? I tilted my head toward the glass window. The city below still buzzed, but on the 34th floor, everything had changed. The room slowly emptied after Derek Vaughn left, signing with defeat heavy on his face. Board members and legal advisors took their turn shaking my hand before exiting, leaving behind a silence so deep you could hear the ticking of the wall clock. Brian and Amber still sat frozen, as if their bodies hadn't caught up with the shock that just hit them. Amber was the first to speak, her voice rough, as if it took everything she had just to get the words out. Mom, I said terrible things to you. I called you lazy, outdated, even made fun of you when you brought cookies to my room. I looked at her, those brown eyes now shimmering with tears, as if for the first time she truly saw me, not the background mom, always available, but the woman behind everything. I never imagined you were the one behind all of this, that an entire company was holding its breath waiting for your decisions. Amber reached for a tissue, her voice cracking. I'm really sorry. You didn't deserve to be treated like that. I walked over to her and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. I don't need you to apologize for not knowing. I just need you to understand. Sometimes strength doesn't come from how loud you speak, but from daring to do the unexpected in silence. Amber let out a sob, then threw her arms around me. For the first time in years, that hug wasn't just a child's obligation. It was a real connection where pride was set aside and understanding began to grow. Brian sat still, hands tightly clasped. He didn't speak until Amber left the room to wash her face. When it was just the two of us, he looked up, his eyes full of fatigue and disbelief. I don't even know where to begin. Linda, you did all this while I went on thinking I was the one carrying the family. I didn't say a word. I just sat in the chair beside him. I used to say you were lucky to stay at home. I bragged about my so-called role while you quietly ran an empire. I wasn't just wrong, I was blind. I looked him in the eye, not with anger, just laying down the truth like a mirror in front of us. I didn't keep it a secret to beat you or to teach anyone a lesson. I kept it because I wanted to be seen as a mom, a wife, without needing a title or numbers to prove my worth. And I never saw that, Brian said, as if admitting something bigger than failure. I let my ego and pride blind me. Linda, I'm sorry. Not just for not knowing, but for not trying to understand. I gently squeezed his hand. I didn't need to say anything more. Some answers don't require words, just a deep enough acceptance to begin again. A while later, Amber returned, eyes still red but looking lighter somehow. So, how long have you been running the company? She asked, curiosity gleaming behind her gaze, now mixed with something like admiration. Since you started middle school. Every morning after dropping you off, I'd head to the office. Every evening, while making dinner, I was reviewing reports through a wireless earpiece. I smiled. I never neglected anyone. I just chose to wear more than one hat. And were you mad that we didn't know? Amber asked softly. I shook my head. No, because I understand. We tend to think the people closest to us are the easiest to see, but often they're the ones we overlook the most. The three of us sat in silence for a moment longer in the now empty boardroom, where just minutes ago lights had flashed and tension filled the air. Amber turned to me, half hesitant, half determined. "Can you teach me, not just about business, but how to be strong like you?" I smiled, looking at her as if truly seeing her, not just as a stubborn teenager, but as someone becoming something more. "Of course, but first, do either of you want some lunch?" Brian chuckled softly, standing up with a voice gentler than I'd heard in years. "After today, I think I need more than lunch. I need to relearn how to be the partner you deserve." I wrapped my arm around Amber, looking at them. My family, now not perfect, but more honest than ever. Today, the mask I'd worn for 7 years was finally removed, and in the light, what I saw wasn't distance. It was hope. Hope for a new beginning, this time with eyes opened and hearts ready to listen. A week after that fateful meeting, the atmosphere in our home had completely changed. No more indifferent glances at dinner. No more sighs from Brian when I reminded him to help clear the table. And most importantly, no more snide remarks from Amber every time I walked into her room with a plate of cookies. In their place came questions, curiosity, admiring glances I'd only seen before when Amber talked about social media celebrities. Now, when I stood in the kitchen making dinner, Amber stood beside me, not to complain, but to observe. "Mom, were you scared when you negotiated with Derek Vaughn?" she asked one evening while I kneaded bread dough. I looked up at her and smiled gently. "Of course, I just didn't show it. Fear is part of stepping into unknown territory, but if you let it take over, you'll never move past your comfort zone." Amber nodded, clearly taking it to heart. "Will you teach me everything? How to run a company, how to stay grounded, and how to make sure no one ever underestimates me again?" I placed a hand on her shoulder and gave it a light squeeze. "I'll teach you everything, as long as you're willing to learn. But remember, being strong doesn't mean never needing anyone. It means knowing when to stand up and when to listen." Brian changed too. He began listening more, not just at home, but even in our conversations about finances, something he once thought was too complex for women. Now, every morning, he brings me coffee and asks, "What can I help you with today?" A simple question, but each word marks growth. One Monday morning, as I prepared materials for the board meeting, Amber walked into my office holding a notebook. "Mom, I want to work at your company, not just visit. I want to intern. I know I'm not great yet, but I want to start from the bottom. No special treatment. I want to really learn." I stared at her for a long moment, overwhelmed by a strange mix of pride, surprise, and above all, trust. My daughter finally understood the value of quiet effort. "Then you'll start in market research. No using the last name Morgan. No one at the company will know you're my daughter. Deal?" Amber nodded firmly. "Deal. And Mom, I want to buy my own lunch every day. I don't want anyone thinking I'm being sponsored." I laughed. "All right. But I'm still slipping a cookie into your bag each morning. That's just who I am." The change didn't stop at home. Even the office at Orion felt it. I no longer hid behind vague email aliases or joined meetings with my camera off. I stood before the entire team and introduced myself. Linda Morgan, founder, CEO, and also the mom of a teenage girl who once thought her mother was too boring for social media. I used to stay in the background because I thought successful women would always be judged harder. But today, I choose to show up, not to prove anything, but to remind other women, you don't have to choose between career and family. You can be both and be great at both. That speech spread across corporate media platforms. Within a week, our inbox was flooded with congratulations, and Amber proudly brought the Forbes magazine featuring me to school. "So I can finally show off my mom without cringing," she said. Brian was no longer the man at the head of the table, assuming he was the center. Now he's the one who checks in with me before every investment decision, and sometimes simply washes the dishes beside me after dinner. "No complaints. I'm still getting used to you being a CEO," he told me one evening as we sat in the backyard sipping tea under the city lights. "But being married to the strongest woman I've ever met, that makes me prouder than any title I've ever had." I leaned my head on his shoulder and smiled. I don't need to be celebrated, I just need to be seen. And now, finally, I am truly seen. A new journey begins. No more hiding, No more silence. I'm still the CEO, still the mom who wakes up early to make breakfast, still the wife who keeps our family balanced. Summer arrived, bringing sunny mornings and a lively buzz through Orion Tower. But this year held special meaning for me, not because of record-breaking revenue or the finalized Cybernova acquisition, but because for the first time, I walked into the office with something more valuable than success, a family truly walking beside me. Amber, or rather Amber West, the name she chose for her internship at Orion, was busy preparing her first presentation. She refused any special treatment, insisting on being evaluated just like every other intern. When I asked why she chose that name, Amber smiled playfully. I picked Grandma's last name. She was the first person who taught me women can do anything they want. After you, of course. Every morning, the two of us left the house together, carrying coffee and stories we hadn't finished the night before. Brian, now working part-time as a financial advisor, usually saw us off at the door, reminding us, "Knock 'em dead in that exec meeting today, hun." And Amber, don't let anyone doubt your talent just because you're her daughter. At the Monday morning meeting, Amber presented a plan to build a more user-friendly interface for older adults, an idea I had initially dismissed as a side topic. But watching her stand before the leadership team, confident and composed, I saw myself in her. The early days, nerves trembling, speaking in front of people who didn't believe I had anything, beyond a neat ponytail and a polite smile. The development team has started testing the new layout, she concluded, and initial feedback shows a 32% increase in satisfaction. We're not just building advanced technology, we're making it accessible, whether you're 18 or 80. The room applauded. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her, heart full. The girl who once called me a boring mom was now proving to the entire company that she didn't need the Morgan name to earn respect. That evening, as we gathered for dinner, Brian suddenly stood up, holding a small box. "I don't think I've ever truly said this, Linda. Thank you for not giving up on me, and thank you for giving us a second chance, not just in our marriage, but in how we parent." He opened the box to reveal a small gold nameplate engraved with Linda Morgan, CEO, Mom, Inspiration. Amber let out a whistle. "This needs to be hung right outside the main conference room." I laughed, eyes welling up. "Thank you, but I think I'll keep it in the kitchen to remind myself that even while running an empire, I'm still the best cookie baker in this house." Amber wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her head on my shoulder. "And the most amazing woman I've ever known." Brian nodded. "We've all learned something important. That strength isn't about the loudest voice, but the quiet persistence. And sometimes the one holding the whole family together is the one we underestimated the most." I looked at them, my husband, my daughter, and felt more at peace than ever before. No more roles weighing us down, no more distance. We were a family, imperfect but honest, and finally learning how to listen. A month later, Orion hosted its annual summit, the first time the full executive board and their families were invited. I stood on stage, behind me the words, "Technology leads, people make the difference." When I founded Orion, I didn't just dream of breakthrough innovation. I dreamed of a place where anyone could shine, regardless of gender, age, or where they started. I paused. I was once dismissed just because I was a mom, but being a mother taught me how to handle crises, how to see value in each person, and how to build trust. Qualities every CEO should master. The room was silent, then erupted in applause. I saw Amber in the front row, eyes glistening, Brian smiling, proud. After the summit, reporters surrounded me. One asked, "What's your secret to running a company while still being a present mother?" I answered without hesitation. "It's knowing I never had to choose. I can be a CEO, lead a billion-dollar meeting at noon, and still be home in time to bake cookies at night, and both are equally important." That night, as I stood in my familiar kitchen pulling a batch of cookies from the oven, Amber walked in, picked one up, and took a bite. "Is this a victory cookie, Mom?" I smiled, shaking my head. "No, sweetheart. This is a family cookie, and that's always the best kind." From a mother once overlooked in her own home, I quietly built an empire no one saw coming. That journey taught me that a woman's worth isn't defined by the roles others give her, but by her resilience, wisdom, and the love she pours into her family. I no longer hide behind an apron. I'm Linda Morgan, a mother, a wife, and a CEO, and I'm proud to be all of them completely.